Governor Fitzroy was determined that Heke would not cut down the flagstaff a fourth time. He sent to Australia for troops and ships. Kororareka was fortified and garrisoned, and the warship HMS Hazard lay at anchor in the bay. But early in March 1845, Heke and Kawiti assembled about 450 warriors for another attack on the flagstaff. Heke's role was to take the flagstaff itself at the western end of the town, while Kawiti distracted the British with a feint attack on the eastern end.
Our enemy will prove very strong and brave. They will suffer much from us, and we will from them. I am not displeased, for this is war and not play.
The British forces numbered 250 men on land, with cannon, blockhouses, stockades and the support of a warship. The commanders scoffed at warnings of imminent attack, saying, "How will the Māori like cold steel?"
Neither I nor anyone else thought of Heke succeeding in an attack on our forces.
On the night of 10 March 1845, it seemed Kororareka slept securely. For the British sentries on Flagstaff Hill, the night passed as normal. Except that the native owls were unusually active. The bird calls were made by Heke's men, quietly working their way up the hill in small parties. As dawn broke, gunfire rang out from the other end of the town. It was Kawiti and his warriors attacking a gun battery. They easily overwhelmed the small sentry detachment holding it. But it so happened that Captain David Robertson of the Hazard and 45 of his men had marched out early to work on further defences. For Kawiti, this was an unfortunate accident. With other members of the Kororareka garrison, Robertson and his men rushed along this track towards the gunfire. The parties clashed alongside Kororareka's Christ Church. Both sides fired off their guns in the half-light. Some had no time to reload, and the fighting became hand-to-hand, sword to patu. An officer advanced towards Kawiti, sword in hand.
The old chief called out to his men, "Leave him to come to me," as he knelt down in the ready position. Had the soldier known how invulnerable a warrior is in this position, he would have changed his method of attack. However, the officer failed in the attempt, was thrown to the ground, and dispatched with Kawiti's merry.
But some duels were won by the British. Robertson himself killed or wounded 3 Māori before having his right thigh smashed by a musket ball. The two sides lost about 15 men each in the bitter little struggle. Robertson's party was forced to retreat, while Kawiti had encountered much heavier resistance than he had expected. But the main question was, had his attack worked as a diversion? The noise of Kawiti's battle with Robertson brought the Flagstaff Guards out of their blockhouse to the rim of the hill, just as Ngāpuhi had planned. Then Heke's party of 150 struck.
Suddenly I heard an alarm, and someone called out that the natives were in the palisades. I immediately turned around and saw a number of natives rushing in and opening fire on us.
Heke and his men overran the small fort and killed 4 of the guards. They began hacking away at the flagstaff.
The staff was observed to fall, and with it the spirits of the British force.
The Hazard began bombarding what it believed to be the Māori positions. The Māori simply held their ground, keeping to cover, and both sides sniped away at each other. With Captain Robertson at death's door from his thigh wound, the remaining British commanders gathered at Pollack's stockade to consider their next move. Pollack's house and its surrounding stockade were crammed with hundreds of civilians and fighting men. One man was smoking in the cellar, where most of the ammunition was stored. At 1 p.m, ash from his pipe fell onto the gunpowder, and the Battle of Kororareka reignited. There was more ammunition aboard the Hazard, but the British decided to abandon the town. All 500 troops, townspeople and refugees were packed into the 6 ships in the bay. Though Heke tried to restrain them, the temptation of an empty town full of rum was too much for his warriors. They began plundering. Heke returned some prisoners under a flag of truce, and it became clear that the Māori would not harm civilians. So missionaries and townspeople went back on shore to the Māori-held town to try to save some of their goods. Soon, anti- and pro-government Māori, as well as Pākehā townspeople, were amicably looting Kororareka together. George Selwyn, the Anglican Bishop of New Zealand, encountered a warrior who had seized a large jar of lollies. He was offered some. A Māori party allowed missionary Henry Williams to empty out one cask of rum they were taking, but were soon seen rolling out another. The strange joint sack of Kororareka went on through the night and continued next day, the 12th of March. The Hazard then spoiled the party with a few volleys of cannon fire. Reminded there was a war on, the Māori set fire to the town. The remaining Pākehā fled hastily to the ships, which sailed away to Auckland. By the 13th of March, Kororareka, the liveliest red light district in New Zealand history, had gone up in smoke.